Hey everybody, welcome to Banjo Quest. We are going to talk about how to mix banjo today, Clawhammer banjo. I'm going to show you how to take equalization, compression, and reverb, free versions of these, and make a beautiful recording out of something that didn't start off so nice. I recorded my banjo for you today using a Studio Classic, live music classic, a Shure SM57. These are amazing microphones for the money. Not my top choice if I didn't have to, but I wanted to give you guys sort of a little bit lo-fi recording that we can then change and make sound a little bit bigger and more beautiful in our digital audio workstation. Before we get started, I do want to mention this is part of a larger module that I've done for Banjo Quest over on Patreon, where we are learning how to write elegant, accurate tablature, we're learning how to create beautiful recordings, and finally, we're learning how to learn by ear efficiently. If that appeals to you, if those are things that you want to learn how to do too, hop on over to Banjo Quest. The link is in the description below. All right, let's mix banjo. We're going to hop on over into Logic. That's my digital audio workstation of choice. I am on a Mac. This is Mac only, so you have to find a PC equivalent. All digital audio workstations, the software that you use to mix music, it's essentially the same. So whether it's Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic, Reaper, Audacity, they're all basically the same thing. So whatever I do here today in Logic should be easily translatable into your DAW of choice. All right, let me get suited up here. Adjust my microphone settings. There we go. So we're going to listen to this first. This is a track I recorded about 8 inches right off the pot with an SM57. It's Soldier's Joy in double C. Real simple arrangement. Let's see how it sounds. Okay, that sounds better than I had expected it to. So the first thing you should know about the mixing part is there's only so much you can do with a single acoustic source like this one track. Only so far you can take it. So it's really important that you try to get it right at the source. If there's something bothering you in the process, don't assume that you can just automatically fix it in the mix. Take your time, get your mic position right, get your performance right, play it well, and then use the mix simply to augment the sound later. So I'm reasonably happy with the sound. It sounds like a banjo recorded with an SM57. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to take a look at my gain. That's the first thing I do. I want to be hitting about -6 on my meters here when I peak. And I did a pretty good job with that. I like to jump around a bit, so you're gonna have to get used to that. So saves time. So if I didn't like the way the gain was working on this track, if I was louder than -6 or if I was a lot quieter, I would simply add in utility, I would add a gain plugin to this strip here. This strip over here is the strip that's attached to that first banjo track up top there that was recorded with the SM57. Here you can just manipulate the gain as you see fit. I don't need to do that, so I like to not have extra plugins on the strip, on the channel strip. Keep it clean if I don't have to have them. All right, first thing we're going to do is we're going to add EQ. EQ is simply, the way I like to think of it, is just a spectrum of sound. And down here is our low sounds, our middle sounds, middle frequency sounds, all the way up to beyond the realm of human hearing. And this is my first go-to fix for any banjo problems I have when I've recorded. So I'm just gonna move some knobs and dials here while I listen to this, and I'll show you the before and after. Gives us sort of an idea of where the sound is on the spectrum. First thing I usually do to my banjo recordings is I like to dip out here, because this 400 area, this 400 hertz area is often a problem area with Clawhammer banjo. If you have too much of this, it can sound muddy. So if I boost it, you're going to hear that sort of congestion. I'm going to do that for you. cloudy. So I like to usually dip out a little bit. I know that the SM57 actually, most of them have a tiny little dip here, so I'm probably going a little shallower than I normally would. The other thing I often do, if I don't do this going into the computer, is I add a high pass filter. And this filters out any of the unwanted rumble, air conditioning, cars driving by, all that stuff that you have to deal with if you're recording in a home. This really helps. It gets rid of all the frequencies that you're not going to need. You can see here that the frequencies don't even begin that we need until, what, 150? So I like to give that some room. I like to slide this, slide down my high pass down to about 80. Then I'm safe. But you really need to watch this. Don't cut off frequencies that you want to be there, because the banjo can start sounding unnatural if you take too much out. Normally, I don't even need this because I apply this on my preamp going in. So I try not to double the work. So I'm not going to put it on this EQ because I did a high pass filter on my preamp going in. Okay, let's keep listening. Sounds very nasally to me, a little bit thin. I suspect it's around the 6K mark. Knowing the SM57, it's got a big bump here. Sounds a little nasally and harsh. And I'm just going to dip some of that out. I'm going to take some of those frequencies away or lower their volume. One thing to keep in mind is you can make this band narrower or wider. This is called the Q of a frequency. So I can be very broad stroked, like this. Or I can get super narrow if I want to. If I have a problem frequency, some kind of resonance that is bothering me, you can really cut it out with this stock Logic EQ plugin. I like to keep things pretty broad, and unless I really hear an error or some really egregious frequency, I like to keep both my cuts and my boosts pretty broad. So I'm going to keep it like that, especially this one. This will be a little narrower, so I don't want to take out too much body. Broader here. And then you just try before and after. So this is before. Let me activate it. Cloudy, a little nasally, a little more natural to my ears. Work with small moves. This stuff can be very hard to hear. If you're listening to me on headphones or good speakers, you're not going to hear any differences of what I'm doing. These are really subtle moves. I want the banjo to retain its naturalness. I don't want any kind of fakeness there, so I'm just trying to keep it as natural as possible. Gonna be hard to hear if you're not used to hearing this stuff, so come back and listen again. Listen to this part of the banjo. Listen to this part of the video several times. You're going to start to hear it. Make sure you got headphones, though. That'll help a lot. All right, last thing I'm probably going to do here is I'm going to just add a little air on the top. Start extreme. Even though this is above, once we start getting to 16 and over into the 20s, this is above the threshold of human hearing, it still will influence lower frequencies. So often adjusting these high frequencies, the air band, does a nice thing to frequencies that are in the audible section of the spectrum. So I like to just boost just to give it sort of, I don't know, a little breathiness, a little room to breathe, but your mileage may vary. This high part, this entire high part of the banjo can be really harsh. I'll show that to you here in a bit. If I were to boost this entire section, it starts getting too thin and harsh. You hear a lot of pick sound. So I generally like to keep the banjo a little bit on the dark side because I like I like that sound. It's just what I like. I have found that as I've gotten more mature with my ears, I used to like things super, super bright. The older I've gotten, the more I've listened, the more I prefer a darker tone. So I tend to be very gentle in this area. So that's our basic EQ curve. I'm going to make it a little steeper. I'm used to mixing on my main monitor, so mixing on these headphones is a little weird. I hope this is working. All right. Let's go to the next part of the video. Let's add some compression. All a compressor is a volume control. So the compressor will kick in and it can lower the volume of certain passages depending on how you program it. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of depth here. Learning how to hear compression and use compressors well has probably taken me about 15 years of work and study, and I'm still learning. This is going to be very hard to hear. One of my biggest tips for learning how to use compressors is to keep the volume on your playback extremely low. That will give you a sense of what it's doing to the peaks of the instrument. So mix at a low volume, just nice and quiet, just so you can barely hear it. That's a big tip. It really helped me when I stopped listening to the playback so loud. So we're going to just play here. Compressors are to taste, so you got to just listen and use your best guess. One of the things with Clawhammer Banjo, you can see by looking at the waveform here, there are a lot of spikes, there are a lot of transients. That's because the banjo, Clawhammer Banjo at least, is percussive in nature. It's like hitting a drum, so we get these spikes of tone, and then it dwindles into very quiet sort of tone after that. That makes mixing banjo and recording banjo really challenging. So we're going to use our compressor to kind of control these peaks. This is very spiky, and I want to bring those peaks under control so it doesn't kind of stab the ears and sound harsh. This is the Platinum compressor that's built into Logic. It's the free Logic compressor. I think it is amazing. It's easily overlooked. You can spend thousands of dollars on plugins. The stock plugins in Logic, I think, are incredible. The longer I've gotten to use them, I've tried the expensive ones. I have hardware compressors too. The Logic compressors aren't usually as good as the hardware compressors, but in my opinion, but they are very close and they're excellent. The control you have is really good. This Platinum compressor, you've got tons of different compressor voicings here in Logic. All of them have a sound and a tone all their own. This Platinum digital compressor to me is the cleanest of the bunch by a wide margin. It's the cleanest compressor I have ever used, either hardware or digital. I really like it for banjo. So let's add some compression. You can see these are our peaks, and you can see this top area here. That compressor is lowering the volume. And this is the stock setting that the compressor has when you first open it up, and it's honestly not too bad. We've set it to auto release, so when the compressor lets go of the signal, it's doing it where it's program dependent. That just means that it's making a decision based on the velocity and the timing of the phrasing to release the volume as we go. So I often turn this off. I want to control that a little bit, but if you're learning how to use a compressor, the auto is usually the safe setting. I'm going to turn it off for today. The faster I choose to have the compressor release, usually the more transparent the compressor is. So you can see that if I have it slow, it'll really hang on to the volume changes. You can really, that becomes quite audible. So I like to have it be faster, on the faster side. It sounds more natural to me. Okay, so our ratio will increase how much the volume is lowered when it hits, when the compressor activates. So again, I don't want to go too into detail here, but I tend to keep it at between 2 and 3 for Clawhammer Banjo. I am trying to be super gentle. A compressor can absolutely mangle Clawhammer Banjo, so you've got to be real careful. You got to go slow. You got to be light with the compressor. So that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm going to keep it, let's go to 3, just so maybe you can hear it a little bit more. Threshold is when it starts kicking in. I really only want it for the peaks. I'm going to stay at -20 for now. Not going to worry about knee for now. It's not important for us right now. Good, it didn't kick in this quiet passage here, which is nice. I want to preserve some of the dynamic range of the recording. I'm raising the attack so it kicks in a little faster. Let's see, what is that? That's about 5 milliseconds, 5.5 milliseconds. This is with it off. That's with it on. Good, I like that. That's pretty good. That's a quick and dirty compressor setting, so you're gonna have to mix to taste. One of the things you've got to keep in mind is compressors can make the overall sound louder, and ears can be fooled. You can be fooled into thinking the louder version is better simply because it's louder. It's just a psychoacoustic thing that happens. Humans tend to prefer the louder sounds, the louder the music. That's why you got into the loudness wars in the 90s and the 2000s, where mastering engineers were cranking the volume of the overall track so that it really popped on the radio. We're kind of past that now. So just don't deceive yourself. Try to be honest about what you're hearing. If you throw a compressor on your track and you're like, I don't hear the difference, or I don't like the difference, leave it off. This is not a necessary step. It's just what I do to my own taste. The final thing I like to play with is called parallel compression. So I mix the dry signal, the original signal, in with the wet signal, the compressed signal, and that gives me an overall more natural sound in the end. It's a little less compressed. So I usually go 90% wet signal. It tempers the sound of the compressor just a bit. Yeah, so I'm already noticing. If you look here in my compressor, the before, the input gain and the output gain, it's a little louder coming out. So I'm getting a little bit fooled. I gotta be careful. So I'm gonna drop that by 2 dB. Yeah, it still adds a little bit of fullness and just shaves off those transients a little bit so they're not pokey in the eerie, which I like. I like it to be a little bit more mellow for this recording. So I drop my output gain by about 2 dB to accommodate the louder signal coming out. And that way I'm not getting fooled when I A/B the pre-compressor and the post-compressor signals. And I like that. I'm gonna stick with that. All right, the final thing we wanna do is we want to add reverb. This is the fun part. This is where you get to be a little bit artistic. So there are lots of ways to apply reverb to a track. Oftentimes I will send it to buses and auxiliary tracks where you can blend the signal to taste. So I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to use a reverb that is built into Logic. Just come down here on our little strip, and I'm going to go to the Chroma Verb. This is just a stock plugin. Let's see what we got. This is where you can really have some fun. You can also totally ruin your track. So here's my philosophy on reverb. It took me a while to get here, but I want to share it with you. I used to soak my stuff in reverb because I thought it sounded cool and professional and expensive when I put a lot of reverb on it. Way back in the early 2000s, that's the way I used to do things. I would just drench everything in reverb. A lot of recordings from that time are also drenched in reverb. Some very famous acoustic recordings. There's just something about the 90s and 2000s where the engineers just loved it too. Nowadays, I like to keep the reverb so that it's barely audible. You only know it's there when you shut it off. You kind of miss it when it's gone, but you can't really hear it when it's there. That adds just a little bit of resonance and ambience, puts the banjo in a physical place, but it doesn't overwhelm the ear so that you're hearing these digital reverb trails, because this is a fake reverb. This is just the digital algorithm that's reproducing echoes and sounds and that kind of thing. So I don't want a ton of that. I want to keep it as real as possible. Just want to augment the image of the recording. So let's do that. I tend to like dark reverbs. Again, back to the darkness theme, but also bright reverbs to me sound digital and fake. So the dark reverbs tend to sound a little bit more natural, as if it is the actual room resonating with the instrument. So I like the dark stuff. All right, so one of the great place to start with reverb is just to check the presets. And I go for a medium size room, usually a chamber or a room. Let's go. I like chamber. I'm going to go orchestra chamber. That sounds kind of cool. Let's turn it all the way wet so you can really hear what this is doing. Okay. This is totally usable. I don't agonize over this stuff. I just try to get in as quick as I can, get the reverb done, and move on. You can really go down the rabbit hole hearing all the different things, but you know, if it's so low in the mix, it's not a huge deal. Just find something you like, stick with it, and just go with it. Don't agonize. So I like what that's doing. It's barely there. You might not hear it at all. That's what I want. Let me shut it off. I like that. I'm usually between 3 and 6% wet signal when I'm using reverb. I'm very judicious about its use. And this EQ curve is cool because it gives us darkness. We can cut out the highs. Remember our EQ, you can EQ the reverb as well. I'm going to keep that flat. I'm going to duck out a little bit of 400 so I don't get a lot of buildup there. We'll keep a little bit of low end, a little bit of body. Be a little more conservative with it. Good. I'm reasonably happy with that. So let's listen to this track. Let's do a before and after. I just want to tweak. I heard something in the EQ that I want to tweak. So you can always go back and change things. Thicken the sound a little bit, because one of the things about this SM57 dynamic mic is it's got kind of a thin tone to it. It's a little shrill. I'm used to recording with a nice big condenser that gives a full bottom end to the sound. So I'm trying to thicken the tone a little bit by adding just a little bit at I don't know, I usually do between 150 and 200 depending on the tuning, depending on the instrument. I like that. That's good. All right, so let's do an A and B, a before and after. So we're gonna going to bypass all of the plugins to hear what it sounds like without. And then I'll turn that on. Bypass. Turn them on. Good. I'm happy with that. That's a nice little recovery. I'm surprised that the Shure SM57 got me this recording. This sounds really good to my ears. It's reasonably good. Let's just hear what this might sound like. Let me bypass everything just as sort of a final thought. I'm going to switch between the SM57 raw, no processing, no plugins, nothing, and my Erland mic, a big diaphragm condenser. I want you to hear the difference between sort of generic, inexpensive microphone and something that is sort of purpose-built for recording acoustic instruments especially. All right, let's do this. So that should give you some idea of the differences between a $100 mic and an expensive large diaphragm condenser on Clawhammer Banjo. They were both recorded at the exact same place, exact same take of a performance. So there's no difference in position. They were right on top of each other. The large diaphragm condenser to my ears just sounds so much more natural, so much more rich. The SM57 is doing an admirable job. It's great for the price. It's durable. They're bomb-proof, but there's something sort of thin and nasally about it that you just can't get rid of. It's really hard to get rid of that sound in the final recording. I also think in general that the big diaphragm condenser, the Erland, just takes the transients and it's just accurate. It's very accurate to how I hear the banjo in the room. It's just an amazing, amazing microphone. Every time I use it, I just feel very lucky to get to use it because it does Clawhammer really well. Anyway, that does it for mixing banjo. That is how you take a raw bit of audio and transform it into something a little bit bigger and more beautiful and correct some of the errors that you might find in a typical banjo recording. The next step would be a mastering pass. So I would render this, bounce it as a final wave file, and then I would put it back into Logic and master it. So I'd probably take one more pass with a different equalizer, and I would put a limiter on it so I could raise the overall volume of the track without going over and distorting when people play it back on phones and computers and other devices. So that mastering step is a separate step. I try to treat them totally separately, put on a different hat when I do that, and I do that for every single YouTube video I make. I apply processing on the mixed phase, and then I master it separately. So all of my audio goes through this two-step process. I will be going over how to do that, how I do that, over on Patreon if you're interested. I do hope I see you over there, and I will see you next time on Banjo Quest.